Yes, greetings, 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 people. It's me, Ruben, again. Come back to tell you more about the history of Kemet. Following on from the last video when we was talking about the Middle Kingdom, yeah, stretching from the late 11th dynasty, going right through to the 14th dynasty, yeah, and we was talking about how in the late 11th dynasty, uh, a ruler called Mentuhotep I invaded the north in retaliation to desecration of the first dynasty tools by the nobles who were ruling in the north, in Lower Kemet. It's interesting to know about that incident that the nobles chose specifically the first dynasty tombs to desecrate, because if you remember, we was talking about that in the second video that we did when we was talking about the early period, and we was talking about how the during the first dynasty, the nobles, the royal servants, were were the ones who were expected to lay down their lives after the king's death. So they would sacrifice their own lives after the king's death. So and that was part of the system. So it kind of got me thinking when I dug down into the fact that these nobles who were, what were they? I think they were the 10th dynasty. How they were desecrating the first dynasty tomb specifically. So that kind of shows you that perhaps they had, even though we're talking about Libyan heritage, it kind of raises the possibility that some of these people during the first dynasty, some of these servants, were actually escaping and taking exile in Libya, and these people who have since migrated back into Egypt, into Lower Kemet at some point. That those kind of hostilities, those kind of feelings of what we call it, angst, are really still there, yeah, and so it comes out at that point. So that was interesting, really, to kind of look into and dig down a little bit deeper into. We also talked about the 12th dynasty, a ruler called Amenemhat, who was he was the first ruler by that name, and how he was a military general under the pharaoh Mentuhotep IV, and how he fought for him and then overthrew him, and how the 12th dynasty marked a time of when the Egyptian people, the nation, was expanding its borders, going down into Nubia and north into Canaan, and they would go on to invade into Libya as well as forming alliances with Lebanon and Greece, and developing, as time would go on, developing a more friendly relationship with Canaan. So that friendly relationship would really go on and build and flourish to the point that the Canaan migrants that were now kind of very numerous in the northeast region were beginning to gain more and more influence, and were actually given more kind of a level of independence within and under the rule of the pharaoh. So that would bring in the 13th and the 14th dynasty, because the 12th dynasty then has shrunk, given the Canaanite growth in the Near East, in the Northeast, and also at that same time you got Nubian, who are also claiming independence. So the 13th dynasty shrinks somewhat, and and I think it would over time become weaker. In fact, it would go on until the point when we get the introduction of the 15th dynasty, which also brings in the second intermediate period. Okay, so we're talking about the second intermediate period starting from around 1674. This is the time when the Hyksos, these are Asiatic people who had conquered in Canaan. I think they're a warrior people, really, a kind of almost a nomadic kind of grouping of people who had kind of formed themselves into an army and had begun conquering various territories in the Near East. So they had eventually now conquered over across into the Kemetic borders, and the Canaanite rulers who were there pretty much just allowed them peacefully to take over. Yeah, so the 13th dynasty itself was significantly reduced by this Hyksos dominance that had come into the north, and they were forced south into Upper Kemet. Yeah, so Hyksos' presence would see many cities destroyed, and the slaughter or enslavement of much of its people. So over this time now, from 1674 right through to about 1650, Hyksos' influence was mainly in Lower Kemet, and the 13th dynasty was more or less reduced to just staying within the borders of Upper Kemet, sorry. So the early Hyksos kings, perhaps naturally, assumed for themselves the Western Semitic style titles. But Kayan, who came to the throne around 1610 BC, would change that tradition in his time as king. Yeah, and he started taking traditional Kemetic titles as well. Much as the rulers of the 14th dynasty had done before. Okay. So the 13th dynasty, by this time, had already kind of been wiped out. I'd say around 1650. It kind of happened because of a war. There was a war that occurred at this time, which was kind of the final blow on the 13th dynasty. The Hyksos managed to wipe them out and take over in Upper Egypt. Yeah. So having done that, they would put their own people in, which tended to be kind of the Canaanite people. They would put them in place in Upper Kemet, and that would be the beginning of the 16th dynasty from around 1660 BC. Yeah. The Canaanites were kind of supporters of the rulers in Lower Kemet, and the 13th dynasty was pretty much reduced to being an insurgency type force in the region before eventually fading away. Okay, so the 16th dynasty itself, let me just dig down a little bit deeper into the 16th dynasty. I've got some more notes on the 16th dynasty. The Hyksos approved development of this dynasty was clearly meant to mark the end of the legitimate disposition of the 13th dynasty in the south. Even though the dynasty had been brought into existence, the kings of the 13th dynasty continued to operate, possibly for as long as a couple of decades. Yeah, they would have probably been shrinking. They would have probably been a shrinking insurgency type force in the south for this period of time, as they suffered dwindling levels of enthusiastic support from the indigenous people in this region. But the 16th dynasty itself would be crushed after it had begun to successfully claim independence from the Hyksos. This happened after the indigenous people of Upper Kemet managed to finally dismantle the Canaanite rulers that had been put in place. Yeah, so that didn't last very long, and the Hyksos would come back and kind of put them in their place, basically. Not before they had started looting and destroying all the temples in Thebes. Okay, so after they had done that, the Hyksos withdrew from Upper Kemet, and because of their own kind of troubles, what was going on, internal conflicts and things like that, this kind of gave room for the 17th dynasty to be established in Upper Kemet under Re-Hotep, and the objective was to restore that which had been previously desolated. So they were now looking at trying to bring some kind of restoration to the destruction that had been brought about or left behind by the Hyksos. So the 17th dynasty would continue to grow in strength, and the last two kings of this dynasty, whose names were Teo and Chemos, they would wage war against the Hyksos in the north, and eventually drive them out of Kemet altogether, bringing an end to the 15th dynasty. Yeah, so we're talking now coming through till about 1535 BCE, and the Hyksos presence would still be there in the north, probably near the border, but certainly significantly reduced. And like I say, the end of the 15th dynasty would also mark the end of this second intermediate period, and bring in the new 18th dynasty. So we're going to talk about that in the next installment, but for now we're going to leave it at that, and so I will see you in the next video. Yeah, so if you like the video and you like what we're dealing with, why don't you come and check us on our Facebook page, Afraka. Know yourself.